Head, shoulders, knees, and toes, everything from butts and guts to your heart and every other body part. Hello, and welcome to Medical Minds Conversations with Guthrie Experts. We're so happy to have you here with us today. You just heard an awesome rendition of Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes, and that was courtesy of Cortland High School's Modern Band program, and they did an awesome job. So thank you very much to them for doing that for us. Such creative minds and voices. And for any other music programs out there who may now have the itch to do the same thing, at the end of this podcast, you can listen and find out a way that you can send us your version, and hopefully we'll be able to play that on a future podcast. So, my name is Steve Osterhaus. I am communications coordinator with the Guthrie Clinic, but I also served for more than 2 decades now, unfortunately. It's a long time to say, as a journalist. So I like to ask questions. But my co host, who is going to be with me here every single episode, is Dr. Corinne Johnston, who is a family medicine physician and also the chief patient experience officer here at the Guthrie Clinic. So, Dr. Johnston, hello.
Hi, Steve. Thank you, and welcome to our listeners today. Very excited about the opportunity to talk to you monthly or more through our podcast. So, as Steve said, my name's Corinne Johnston. I'm a family medicine physician with Guthrie. That means that I take care of you from birth to death, and even when you're in your mom's belly. I also like to tell my patients often that I'm the doctor that knows a little bit about a lot of things, which makes me curious about pockets that we have in healthcare. And I assume, Steve, I'll be asking a lot of questions too.
Yes. Well, your little bit about a lot of things is still a lot more than I will ever know about these topics. So that's fantastic. And we did that on purpose, right? One of us is
Yeah.
not clinical and the other is clinical, and I think that's
Yeah.
really gonna really mine some great information from the experts that we're gonna have on talking with us. Our goal really is to talk about topics that are going to be
Mhm.
helpful to the people listening, help them or maybe a family member live, a little bit healthier lifestyle. And,
Yeah.
speaking of lifestyles, that full disclosure, I'm in the middle of trying to lose some weight, which I think has been successful. And it
Mhm.
has made me feel better. So, what they say is true. So I've lost some
Yeah.
weight and I feel better, but then at the same time,
Mhm.
I'm also finding myself waking up in the morning and different noises are happening, different levels of soreness, things like that. So I mentioned I
Yeah.
was a journalist. I wanted to look into it, and I found, we can call it the word of the day, right? So what does that really boil
Mhm.
down to? And it's crepitus, and
Yeah.
Crepitus, and I guess is from the Latin of decrepit, which sounds horrible, but it is what it is.
We do. So many things in medicine we give these horrible names or associations with. But really, crepitus is the cracks and pops that you start to feel from your joints as you age. I think most commonly we feel them in our knees. We sit a funny way. We stand up. Oh, that hurts. You feel some popping. You stretch it out and you move. I think that crepitus is the prime example of things that if we would have known when we were younger, when I was a teenager, if I would have known all of that beating up I was doing to my body would lead to this at an early 40 years old, I would have taken it a little bit easier, Steve. And I
Yeah,
think,
no.
yeah, talking about those things, we wish our teenage self would have known. What would we have told ourselves? Let's talk about smoking. Steve, did you know that most tobacco users start between the age of 15 and 16 years of age? And now our teenagers have to contend with e cigarettes or vapes, as we like to call them. I think vaping has become a verb in our dictionary because of this at such a young age.
Yeah, and what I found too is you talk about how it's such a young age, and it is kind of startling to hear those numbers. But I guess the traditional smoking, if I think back to my younger self, kids were smoking at that age, so I guess it's not totally surprising. But then as a parent now, it's a little bit more alarming. So I did a little research. My unscientific research, we'll call it, and
Yeah.
reached out to my 20-year-old son, who is in college, and getting in touch with him was a little bit difficult because he's living his best life right now overseas
Yes, he
studying
is.
abroad. So
Mhm.
the fact that I got a response, I guess, said something.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
just asked him, how many kids your age, in your circles, what have you, are vaping. And almost immediately he said, honestly, probably about 50%. And he
Wow.
said that it's annoying. He also put that in all caps. And
Yeah, good for
I
him.
was shocked by, yeah, no, yes, I'm happy to hear that. But 50%, I know it's unscientific, but really, if you think about it, that's every other person he comes into contact with. That's a pretty easy number to come to. So I was really shocked by that number.
Yeah. No, I think that we have seen, as we have seen over time, cigarette smoking use decline. We have seen vapes replace that. So oftentimes I'll hear in my exam room, "Hey doc, I quit smoking. I use a vape now." And I think the evidence is out, or not out yet to know, is that better? Is that safer? And I often think as a parent, how do I talk to my kids about this and what should I be saying? So it's a timely month to have this conversation.
It is, the depending on when people are listening to this episode, Great American Smokeout is November
Mhm.
21st this year. It's every November. And
Yeah.
speaking of the Great American Smokeout, I used to remember it being, maybe it's because I'm no longer working in the media circles. I remember hearing more
Yeah.
about it, which I don't know what that says. Either I'm paying less attention to the news, or maybe the events aren't as high profile as they used to be. But I think it was a great opportunity to at least get the word out there, right? And that,
Yeah.
it's an opportunity to help you quit, but I don't hear about that as much.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Now, maybe that's because this month there was something big that happened this past Tuesday, maybe an election.
Right.
But but I don't think we publicize it as much as we used to. And while lung cancer in November being Lung Cancer Awareness Month, lung cancer is caused by several things, but the primary cause of lung cancer is still cigarette smoking. So something that we see fairly regularly still in society. So I think we're excited today to bring in our experts to talk to us a little bit more about vaping, the use, and how we talk to our children about that.
Yes, and for anybody, since we did bring up the Great American Smokeout, if anybody has any more questions about that, you can still go to the websites of the American Cancer Society, because they'll
Mhm.
often have listings, just tips on their own and ways to quit, but also some
Yeah,
listings of some local events if you're interested in attending or finding out more.
absolutely. So, joining us today are Dr. Andy Worley, Chief of Pediatrics for Guthrie, and Dr. Raj, a well loved Guthrie pulmonologist. Thank you both for joining us today. We're talking about the dangers of vaping, as it is, as we mentioned earlier, Lung Cancer Awareness Month. And we thought it would be important to bring both of you on to talk about the health issues we see from vaping, trends of vaping, how do we see this in our younger population. So, kind of leading into that, we know in the US that youth use e cigarettes and vapes more than any other tobacco product. And in 2024, the numbers were around 1.5 million students were using vapes, and over 400,000 of them were middle school aged children. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So, as a parent of a middle school age child, that is really concerning. Probably many parents who are listening to this are thinking, no, I haven't had that conversation with my kid yet, right? Because you don't think you need to have this early.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first thing is it's kind of a shocking, those numbers are shocking, but they make a lot of sense. Vapes are really marketed for kids. They really are. They have cool flavors. They look cool. They can look like anything. And we could talk about all the different vape things you can find out there. That it's crazy.
Yeah.
But they really are marketed to kids, and people think that it's better for them, it's healthy, and then there's like social influences, right? It's like a cool thing to do now, you
Mm.
know? So yeah, it's those numbers are shocking as a parent, but really inspiring that like we need to change something, right?
Yeah.
You talked about they are shocking, and Dr. Johnson and I were talking earlier, my 20-year-old son, and some of the numbers that I did my unscientific poll, and he said would not be surprising to say 50% of the people around me are
Oh,
vaping. And he didn't include himself, so we're gonna keep our fingers crossed in that one. But My daughter, who is in eighth grade, so we're going back to the population we were just talking about,
Hmm.
and I haven't had that conversation with her either, or even thought to, but she said, well, maybe like 5%, and 5% floored me. I thought that was just a
Mhm.
crazy number of people at that age.
So,
You mentioned marketing. I mean, is that what it really boils down to then? And when we were growing up, it was the Camel cigarettes, Joe Camel, and
Yeah.
that was what they were trying to do to market to kids.
you know, if you look at the history of e-cigarettes, it started marking as an alternative to smoking. But
Hmm.
in 2006, it entered the U.S. market. But since then, it has been came in with different devices. There's not just one devices, and so if you look at the devices used for vaping, they are not like doesn't look like traditional tobacco products. They may look
Hmm.
like pen devices, USB flash drives, which is easy
Yeah.
to carry and hide too, and
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
gained kind of popularity among these middle school and high school childrens, high school kids. So
Yeah.
and again, there is like as you as Andrea mentioned, there is like a lot of catchy things like flavoring, like candy flavor, a lot of different things being done to attract, especially the students, which is
Yeah.
which is why we are seeing these kind of vaping related health effects in these kind of patient population.
Yeah. In serious too, Dr. Raj, serious health conditions. I mean, we see
Hmm.
kids that are admitted in basically they can't breathe, right? Respiratory failure
That's
in
true.
our world from
Yep.
vaping.
Hmm. Hmm. So they usually the symptoms starts in days to weeks. So they start having breathing trouble. They may have some fever, cough. Uh, Usually where we don't see like a phlegm production in these kind of lung inflammation. What it does is it causes some chemical pneumonitis inflammation. Pneumonitis is nothing but lung inflammation. Okay,
Yeah.
so because of that, people have trouble breathing, and even sometimes they get like unrelated, nothing related to their respiratory symptoms, such as like diarrhea, headache, and dizziness too. So
Yeah.
eventually, if they have keep vaping further in subsequent days, they will end up in the hospital and requiring high level of oxygen, sometimes even on a ventilator too.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right,
If
So
because
you
they're
look
actually,
at look at. Mhm.
go ahead, Ian.
so what I was going to say is because they're not just inhaling water, right? These are like
Yeah.
Mhm.
chemicals. And that's what people
That's
aren't
true.
realizing. These are chemicals, and the ones contain
Yep.
nicotine, right? So that's an addictive substance. But even the ones that are non-nicotine aren't safe. There's
No.
That's
chemicals,
true. Yeah.
formaldehyde, things that you don't want in your lungs being superheated and being breathed in,
That's
right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you'd like to think that you don't have to wait 30 years for, publications to come out and say, oh, by the way, yeah, we said it was a safer alternative, but it really wasn't. We know that right now, right? I mean, people can say it all they want, but it's not
Hmm.
true.
Yeah. And
That's
and
true.
nicotine in itself is scary, right? I mean, and you could
Hmm.
both speak to that. I had a patient came into my office for a well visit and he had a really fast heart rate and his pressure was very high and he felt lightheaded. And we finally narrowed it down to he had spilled his vape all over his hand before he came in. So right, that
Hmm.
nicotine can go through the skin.
So you can
So
breathe it
And
in,
it's
you can ingest it, and then inhale, on your skin. December in 2014 was the first case of a child drinking a vape and passing away. It was a 1-year-old girl in the US. And
uh-huh.
so one of the things, like we're talking about vaping for these kids, but what parents need to understand is if they vape, they need to keep those products away from their young children. The poison control hotline gets thousands of calls a year of children exposed to vape. And so the nicotine can be very dangerous for children. So that's another health issue with these vapes.
yeah.
So why do you think it, I mean, I guess it's a difficult question to answer, right? So we've got the marketing, we've got it being addictive, but what about like the whether it's the peer pressure or the social anxiety, things like that? Is it, I remember back in my college days, it seemed like people were sometimes smoking cigarettes because it was something to do in an uncomfortable conversation. it was something that like kept you occupied. So is that something too where these kids are using it as just like a tool? And maybe it's not a question we can really answer, but it just seems like there have to be so many different reasons why the incredible numbers that we're hearing of kids are trying this.
Dr. Worley,
Yeah,
I hear you. I'm sure you
yeah.
hear things in your practice that they tell you
Oh,
why.
yeah, yeah. It's all these kids think that, and a lot of it seems like excuses, right? Like, oh, helps my anxiety, these things, that
Yeah.
other thing. A lot of them tend to be excuses. But I think it's just because other kids are doing it. The majority of kids, they get their first the attempt from a friend, just someone offers it, and they say, oh, why not? So I think that there's probably different reasons for every kid, but it's just, it's widely available, and that makes it hard. It makes it hard for parents too, right? So
Mhm.
if your kid is smoking marijuana or cigarettes, they might smell like tobacco, they might smell like cannabis, but you can vape marijuana and it doesn't have an odor. These things are odorless and they're really hard to identify and catch. And like we said, it could be, there's an inhaler. It looks like an inhaler. I think it's from Puffit is the brand name. And it looks like an inhaler for asthma, and it's a vape. Like
Mm,
it makes it really hard to decrease the exposure and catch these kids doing it
yeah.
because of how prevalent it is.
Yeah. Y- You're left.
I
Did my
feel
kid
like
go to
we
Bath and Body Works? Did they go to Bath and Body Works, or are they
that
like
worked.
using a vape in their room?
Yes, exactly.
When you think about it.
That's
Sorry,
true.
Dr.
Yeah.
Raj, I
Hmm.
interrupted. What were you going to say?
Oh, that's fine. Hmm. So, definitely, but there's a peer pressure and also like curious to explore new things. When one kid is talking about one of their friends is talking about, they want to explore things too. So that's kind
Hmm.
of get into this habit of you know let me try this. So that kind of gets into these long-standing habits. But also the contrary, if you look at these kids doing vape, they end up
Hmm.
using other tobacco products too. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what so far the observation has been shown us. So these initially they when they use vape, they end up using marijuana, smoking marijuana, and also smoking cigarettes too. So they
Yeah.
they kind of went ahead and explored other tobacco products, which is scary.
Right. And the
Yeah.
same is true with
Yeah.
alcohol. Like I feel like
Mm,
vaping is the new gateway drug. You know,
Hmm.
that's true.
we've always talked
Yeah.
about gateway drugs, and
Hmm.
vaping is the new gateway drug to all these other
Hmm.
things.
Yeah.
How much, I mean, in your office as a pediatrician, how much do you think parents realize this? Obviously, this is why we're doing this podcast, right? We want to get the message out as much as we can. Do you think parents are as aware as you might hope they would be or should be?
I don't think so. No, I think they're very unaware, and that it makes it hard because uh a lot of these parents are great parents. They want to be involved, they want to know about it, and they want to be aware. And so that's one thing that I really encourage is starting to talk about to your kids about this. Asking them, hey, do any of your friends vape? And even like finding a like good time. Like if you're walking down the street and see a vape shop, or there's a commercial for a vape, or you see an advertisement and say, hey, have you ever seen that? Do any of your friends vape? And just starting the conversation, talking about it, being non-judgmental about it, kind of hearing their thoughts. I think it's just meeting your kid where they are and trying to learn more about it and
Hmm.
coming from that perspective, and then having that opportunity to teach your child about the dangers, right? Because they're not hearing about the dangers. I grew up with the dare officer in school, and so I heard about the
Yeah.
dangers of drug and alcohol and even smoking.
Uh-huh.
But who's teaching them about vaping? And I think schools are more aware. That's the whole reason they had Dr. Johnston come into the school. I think schools really
Yeah.
are aware this is a problem and trying to address it. But it's going to take parents, teachers, doctors, all of us to help
Hmm.
address this problem.
Yeah. And, I often think, and maybe Dr. Raj, you see this in your practice, when I see an adult in my office and I know that they're smoking or they're using a vape
Uh-huh.
and I know they're a parent, I'm not necessarily putting together, so you're not quitting, but what message are you sending to your kids? And then as parents, we're always concerned about being a hypocrite. So how do you, if you're not going to quit, how do you instill in your kid the risk that comes with something they see you do every
Mhm.
day?
That's true, yeah. So, kids basically learn from their parents, right? We
Mm-hmm.
do, we think we are hiding from the kids, but they do watch. They do watch what we do, and that's going to be a initiative or like driving force for them to explore these kind of tobacco products and vaping things.
Yeah. And what do you tell your patients? I mean, a pulmonologist, and I'm coming in with an underlying lung
That's
problem. Yeah.
That's true. People come to me and ask about whether vaping is like an alternative to quit smoking. But ideally, it's not. It's not, right? You still end up getting the same nicotine. Nicotine is one of the most strongest stimulant. It's going to increase dopamine in your brain. It's like very addictive, and it's also
Mhm.
uh, and with that, again, the vaping, there is no one knows what is in it. Different products have different additives. We don't know. There are like few substances they use for creating these aerosol clouds. So
Yeah.
propylene glycol, volatile, there is like volatile glycerin. There are a lot of
Yeah.
things, and also even they have like a e-cigarette juice chamber. So that's
Yeah.
the chamber they use a liquid. So on that
Mhm.
chamber is actually coated with metals like nickel, tin. Even with those vapors, they find those metals too being vaporized. And when you inhale these kind of vapors, it's almost like carcinogens. It's you yourself putting at risk of not just the nicotine, but also the other things which can be a carcinogens.
Yeah.
I think that's the
So
commercial
always,
right there, right? That
Right.
Yes.
sounded disgusting. All the things you just
Right.
mhm.
listed off.
I'm
Right.
gonna go have a nice glass of weed killer while I'm standing in my
Yes.
car exhaust. I think that's
Yes.
kind of what Dr. Raj
Yeah.
put painted for us.
Mhm.
Right. And they're not FDA regulated. So the nicotine
Yeah, nothing.
containing ones
Hmm.
are at this point, but all the ones that
Hmm.
don't contain nicotine aren't. And so, the FDA does keep us safe by not approving things that aren't safe. So no one's researching these things. No one's making sure they're safe for consumption. They are just random chemicals being put in there.
Yes,
And then we
that's
do
true.
know, you talk about nicotine and how addictive it is. We do know that the adolescents, these middle school and high school kids, their brains are still developing. Your brain doesn't stop developing until you were 25. Okay. And we know that nicotine has a higher effect on the developing brain. There's a reason that we don't want, cigarettes are legal or to buy before 21, right? Because we know that it's bad for the developing brain. And so nicotine, it's easier for kids to get addicted to nicotine, and it can have more effects on their concentration, their impulsivity, even their decision making. And so that's really concerning too, that it might be affecting the brain's development,
Yeah.
and have long-term consequences there.
You kind of already answered this with that question, but is that kind of the message that you give to teenagers who come in? There's no real, you can't tell necessarily when somebody is vaping, but I have a feeling you can probably get some hints to some of your patients when they come in. So, like, what do you tell those teenagers, and what can you tell them in your role based on, patient, doctor, that whole thing?
Right, absolutely. So I actually tell them very similar things about marijuana and vaping because so many of the parents in New York, I'm at New York, so marijuana is legal here. And so many of these parents are vaping and using marijuana, and I know that. They're telling me that, which actually it's kind of nice when you hear the truth from your families. I want to know everything, you know. And so it does make a different conversation when you know the parents using it. So what I could say is your parent is legally using this product. They're legally using marijuana, they're legally vaping. The problem is it's not legal for you, and the reason for that is that your brain's still developing. So the impact of what this can do can be long term. So you're still learning, processing, building that IQ bank, and you could limit that based on the choices you have now and make now. And it same goes for alcohol or any of these things. It's trying to get adolescents who don't think about the future and think they're invincible to care about the future. So it is a hard conversation, but I'm just very straightforward with them. That like adolescents know when you are making stuff up, and their full meter is really good. And so I'm honest with them. I just, as much as I can, give them the data, the evidence, and hope for the best.
Yeah.
What about ways to quit? Is there anything either of you could say to be like, here are some options? And we know it's easier said than done, but what do you tell your patients?
So, I've often, even for not just for vaping, even for a nicotine, even for like my regular traditional tobacco products, there are some behavioral things you can do. So, I often must say, better don't smoke inside the house. Okay. And I also often must say them, better have your vape or like cigarettes locked in a box, put it in the back of your car. And if you want to smoke, go out. And if it's like it's going to get, if it's in the winter, it's going to even further reduce the amount of time you spend on smoking. So by doing this, at least you're not exposing your family members to the smoke, which I feel have got good feedbacks from by these kind of behavioral things may help.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely don't smoke in the house. Go outside and smoke, which is going to be good for you, cutting down your smoking and also causing less exposure to your family members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And again, I often say, your children's going to look at you, what you're doing, and they're going to learn from you. So you have to be better be a better, good role model. So those are other things, I'll put them in there.
Yeah.
And those behavioral methods work really well for kids too. So
Mm.
because kids are using these things, we have to, as pediatricians and people who care for children, learn more about these things. Behavioral therapy is really proven to be effective. Although not studied, nicotine replacement, the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, now has guidelines for nicotine replacement to help these kids, right? And so I think that there's a multifaceted way of doing this. The good news is that 60% of kids who vape want to quit. That's awesome. Over half of them do. And that is really great. So finding them where they are and encouraging them. There is also a good resource, teens.smokefree.gov is really great. And they do it there for men, women, that kind of stuff. But the teen one, they can text them. They can sign up for text. They can talk with a specialist, like chat right there about quitting. So sensation. It's a really good resource, and there are a lot of resources online because we want to help teens where they are. So I encourage, if a family knows that their child's vaping, to schedule an appointment with their primary care physician.
Yeah. And I think there was a lot of money that came out of the settlement with Big Tobacco when we had the class action lawsuit. So I think even the majority of the local state Department of Health pages, if you go there, each state has different coalitions, kind of like what you're talking about, Dr. Worley, and programs and recommendations for talking to your kids as well at home, and ways to help them quit.
Well, any final thoughts from the two of you? I think it's been a great conversation. I know I've learned a lot, and I'm hoping our listeners have as well.
No, so as a provider, we are also supposed to report when you see a vaping patient. It's better to get what kind of device they use, and there is a website for even CDC and FDA. They have website you can report it, and they will further do some investigation regarding what specific product is it and what are the additives. They do some analysis, like backup analysis to see what's going on. So that's kind of helpful because it's not just one product. There are like thousands of products out there. Every day where we see like new devices coming out with new combinations, and yeah, so it's hard for them to keep track of all these products too. So yeah, so
Absolutely.
and again, the message we have to get to our listeners is vaping is no different from smoking. and it may be even exposed to more carcinogens than what it was thought it's going to help with quitting smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that for parents listening to this, the important thing is educate yourself, spend just a little bit of time online. Google vape looks like in Google Images, and you'll see all the different
Yeah.
images. Learn some of the names. So like Jewel, I know Jewel, but did you
Yeah.
know that there's Lemonade, Kilo, the top ones are Elf Bar, Breeze, Mr. Fogg. Like learn the names so that when you hear your kids say Geek Vape or Aspire, you think, oh, that's a vape, right? They're like
Mm.
like Dr. Raj said, there are so many different brand names out there, so many different types. But if you can learn some of those lingos, then you know to like if hear what your kids say on the phone or in the back of the car, it might just give you awareness. So as a parent, try to just do a little digging, like learn some of these things just so that you can be aware and then talk to your kids.
Yeah. I think those are all great points. I think we could, talk about this for an extended period of time, but I want to thank you both for taking the time with us today to really share your knowledge, both as healthcare providers, but also as adults, right? And as parents, as in members of communities, because we care about the entire community that we serve. So again, thank you for joining us. Well, Steve, I think we learned a lot today, and we were really lucky to have some of our medical minds join us on our podcast. I often see my path as a physician. I change, I shift gears, I counsel differently because what I experience as a pregnant woman, as giving birth, as a wife, and as a parent. And this topic really came to me because I'm friends with a local principal of a middle school who asked me to come in and talk to the seventh and eighth graders because they were having such or are having such a problem with vape use in that age group and community, to the extent that they have installed special detectors. So normal smoke detectors will not detect the smoke of a vape. So they've installed those in bathrooms and areas that youth congregate. They have backpack searches too, as our guests talked about today, Dr. Worley and Dr. Raj. He showed me some of those zip drives, and they look like a zip drive.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I think when it came to a head was they had a clog in one of their bathroom lines. And when they got down in, it was a clog of vapes, because kids were flushing them down the toilet, or thinking they might have hit the detector off. So getting rid of them so they can't get in trouble. So I think this is one of those things that brought to a head to me that as I see kids in my rooms, my exam rooms, we need to be talking about this more, much like Dr. Borley talked about throughout the podcast. So, food for thought, things for us to think of as parents.
Yeah, and my mind's blown by your middle school visit and the fact that the drains were clogged. I mean, that is just, but it gives me kind of a warm and fuzzy feeling knowing though that, a lot of people may have problems, this technology is moving too fast, we're going too fast. But if that technology can detect vape devices and things like that, that's only going to be beneficial to
Yeah,
our kids and everyone's kids. And I also found it really interesting when Dr. Worley was talking about that while the numbers are high, I think she said it was 60% want to quit,
yeah,
which is also a great feeling too, knowing that, okay, they know it's not good for them. I
yeah,
guess that's the biggest part of the battle. As they
yeah.
say, knowing is the hardest part or whatever.
Oh, yeah. And bringing it full circle, right? Our 15, 16, 17-year-old self might think, I'm just going to do this for a year or two and then I'll
Yep.
quit, right? I'm just going to play football on a hurt knee for a game or two and then I'll stop, and we lead decrepitous, right, with that. So, how do we intervene to help those young minds develop the way that they should and really advocate for them when they want to quit?
Exactly. You just mentioned crepitus, and like almost on cue, the lights went out in my office. So I think that I'm being told something. My body is aging very quickly. But no, yes, and it's just you're right. Like you said, what you would tell your young self and the impact of the things you do at a young age, on you as you continue to develop. And also that message to parents of all the different types of things and devices and get out there and
Yeah.
learn. I know I'm going to go
Yeah.
and do some research myself and, find out what some of these things look like, sound like, the names of them, and just to make sure that I can, be as good of a parent as I can, on
Yeah.
my side.
Yeah. Because who's going to hear their kids say elf and think that they're talking about tobacco use, right?
Right. I'm thinking of a movie or the one on the shelf. That's
Yes,
about that's where that
exactly.
comes from.
Exactly.
So, well, speaking of kids, we mentioned off the top of the
Hmm.
rendition of Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes, and how that was from Cortland High School, and really appreciate them for that. But for
Yeah,
those who may have another music program, because we know there's a lot of talented kids out there who
there are.
want to do their own rendition, they don't have to do the full song, maybe just some instrumental and really that one strong verse, that we're all accustomed to.
Yeah,
And feel free to record a clip and send it to us at corporate_communications at guthrie.org. Again, that's corporate_communications at guthrie.org. And we would love to have a chance to play that for you.
absolutely. Many talented artists in our community that can give us another,
Oh,
perhaps not
absolutely.
a headbanging version, but another
Right.
great version of a song we've all known since we were little.
Yes, you do you. Any version, any appropriate version will do. Our goal is to keep people out of the doctor's office, out of the
Yes.
emergency rooms, right? So, we have ways, to get more information to you, helpful tips, screenings, all sorts of things that might help you go about your daily life.
Yeah. And so to do that, right, Steve, they go to the Guthrie webpage. So the
Right.
guthrie.org/engage.
Right.
And engage, what is engage? What is Guthrie engage when
It's
they're looking at that?
Guthrie Engage. It's Guthrie Engage, play an active role in your health. And
Hmm.
that doesn't have to mean run a marathon, because I'm not doing that personally.
Yeah, me
Um,
either.
and I love runners, but I'm just not one of them. But it's just a way to make sure that you living at home stay engaged in your own health. And again, like I said, screenings, just making sure just do those, check under the hood every now and then and make sure you're getting those
Yeah,
screenings when you're supposed to, stuff like
yeah,
that. And then it's also us, with Guthrie engaging with you, helping you do things that can help you live an more active lifestyle.
absolutely. The goal of everything we do every day.
Right. And for those of you listening, if you'd like to put faces to the voices, you can also check out this podcast on the Guthrie YouTube channel. But beware, at least on my end of things, beware what you're going to see.
Sometimes our imagination is better than real life, Steve. But that might be another podcast.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. But Dr. Johnston, it was great chatting with you and our experts today, and we'll do it again next time.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Looking forward to it.
Have a great day, everyone.